My brothers and sisters, before we speak of nations, of movements, of sacrifice and struggle, let us speak of the soul. For no true revolution begins without a revolution within. There are 4 divine signs, 4 sacred markers that reveal when a man or woman is truly walking daily with the Holy Spirit. Peace that surpasses all understanding is not the kind of calm that comes when everything is going right. It is not born from perfect circumstances, nor is it maintained by human logic or reason. It is the kind of peace that invades the soul when all external signs point to despair. It is the stillness of heart a man feels even as storms rage around him, when there seems to be no way out, when loss has touched every part of his life, and yet he walks with quiet confidence, not because of what he sees, but because of who holds him. This peace is not man-made. It is heaven-sent. It is the divine whisper in the inner sanctuary of the soul that says you are not alone. It is the unexplainable assurance that even when the world strips you of everything, position, reputation, comfort, even loved ones, something deeper remains untouched, unshaken, unbroken. It is the supernatural evidence that the presence of God is not a myth or philosophy, but a living, breathing reality that guards your mind and heart in ways that defy every rational argument and transcend every worldly solution. It is the peace that allows a man to smile in the face of ruin, to sleep in prisons, to walk through fire without the smell of smoke clinging to his clothes, because the fire outside cannot compare to the stillness burning within. The unbreakable calm that flows not from strength but from surrender, not from self-assurance but from complete dependence on a power far greater than self, on a love that cannot be earned, on a presence that never departs, no matter how dark the road becomes, no matter how deafening the silence may feel in the midnight hour when even the strongest voices have gone quiet and you are left only with your breath, your thoughts, and the invisible arms of a Father who has never failed and will never fail. This peace is what allows people to walk through injustice and not be consumed by bitterness, to face betrayal and not be destroyed by revenge, to carry grief and still choose joy, to see no way forward yet keep walking as though the path were already paved. It is what sustained prophets in the wilderness, what upheld saints in persecution, what steadied broken men and women who refused to quit because something inside them told them this suffering is not the end. It is a peace that does not erase the pain but transforms it, that does not remove the trial but redeems it, so that what was meant to break you becomes the very soil from which your strength begins to grow. This peace is divine evidence that you are no longer walking in your own energy, that your spirit has been yoked to the Spirit of God, and that your soul is now governed not by fear, not by anxiety, not by the chaos of this temporary world, but by the eternal calm of the one who speaks and the winds obey, who sees all, knows all, and still loves you with a love so vast it drowns every fear, every worry, every whisper of despair that tries to rise against the truth of who you are and whose you are. And even when logic fails, when plans collapse, when time seems against you, when all you can do is stand and breathe and trust without seeing, that peace still flows like a river inside of you, anchoring you when the waves of life threaten to drag you under, holding you firm when nothing else makes sense and no one else understands. Because it is not their understanding you need. It is not even your own understanding that will save you. It is this peace, this divine, unreasonable, unshakable peace that marks the presence of the Holy Spirit in your life. Conviction for truth and justice is not a matter of opinion. nor is it subject to the tides of convenience or public approval. It is a fire that is planted deep within the soul by something eternal, something unmovable, something that refuses to be silenced, even when every force around it screams for compromise. This conviction does not emerge from mere intellect or tradition. It is born when the Spirit of the living God opens a person's eyes to the weight of righteousness, the power of truth, and the ugliness of injustice. It is not satisfied with surface-level appearances or polished lies dressed in elegant speech. It pierces through deception like a sword, exposing hidden agendas, corrupt systems, and the cowardice of silence. Conviction is not comfortable. In fact, it often brings discomfort. It costs relationships, it attracts opposition, it demands sacrifice. But to the one who carries it, there is no other choice. They cannot ignore it. They cannot pretend not to see. They cannot look the other way when the innocent are being crushed, when the powerful manipulate systems meant to protect, when the truth is mocked and justice is delayed. Something within them rises, a holy restlessness, a divine dissatisfaction with evil, and this force will not let them sit still. They do not speak because they want to be heard. They speak because they cannot bear the silence. They do not act because it is easy. They act because not acting would be a betrayal of everything sacred, everything pure, everything their soul has come to love. In the presence of a just and holy God who cannot and will not coexist with corruption, who hears the cry of the oppressed, who watches when the scales are rigged and the laws are twisted to favor the wicked, who burns with holy anger, not just at murder or theft, but at every form of injustice that parades itself in the clothing of authority. And when you walk with the Spirit daily, you begin to carry a portion of that same holy burden, and it ruins your appetite for shallow peace. It disturbs your ability to live a passive life. It keeps your spirit awake even when your body is tired. And it drives you to your knees in prayer and to your feet in action, because you know deep within your being that to know the truth and not speak is to betray it. To see injustice and not resist is to endorse it. To be silent when others are suffering is to stand on the side of their oppressor, even if your lips say otherwise. This conviction is not self-righteousness. It is not born from pride, but from the crushing humility of having stood before the Almighty Judge, having seen your own faults, and yet being called to stand for what is right anyway. It is not moral superiority, it is moral responsibility. It is the awareness that truth is not yours to possess or manipulate. It is yours to uphold and protect, even when that truth exposes your own weaknesses, even when it demands you challenge your own tribe, even when it calls you to lose everything you thought you needed to gain the one thing that truly matters. Alignment with heaven, conviction for truth and justice gives no room for neutrality in the face of oppression. It does not allow you to play both sides or sit on the fence when evil is prospering. It whispers at night when others sleep comfortably. It stirs you when you wish to settle. It calls you out of apathy and into purpose. And it anchors you to eternal standards that do not shift with the culture or bend to power. It gives you the courage to confront systems, to challenge narratives, to stand in front of giants without armor. Because you know who stands with you, who fights through you, and who judges all things in the end. This conviction changes how you see people. It no longer lets you reduce them to numbers or categories. It forces you to see the image of God in every face, the cry for dignity in every life, the worth in every soul. It keeps your conscience alive, your spirit awake, and your voice ready, not just for protest, but for purpose, not just for resistance, but for reform. And when others are weary or afraid, this conviction remains because it does not rely on applause or results. It relies on the Spirit of truth himself, who cannot lie, who cannot be bribed, and who will not rest until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Supernatural love is not the kind of love that can be taught in books or manufactured through effort or discipline. It is not human at its core. It is not transactional, not dependent on worthiness, not reactive to how others behave. It does not originate in the emotions, nor is it anchored in mutual agreement. Supernatural love flows from a place far beyond logic and biology. It comes when the Spirit of the living God takes residence in a person and begins to pour out a love that has no limit, no condition, no breaking point. This is the kind of love that looks into the eyes of an enemy and still sees a soul, still sees value, still sees potential redemption. It is the love that causes a man to carry a cross for people who mocked him, to forgive from a place of deep agony, to plead for mercy on behalf of those who were unjust. It is a divine force that overrides pride and shatters bitterness. It does not need an apology to forgive. It does not require a reason to show kindness. It stands even when betrayed. It embraces even when wounded. It speaks life where others speak condemnation. It reaches into the darkest places, into broken families, shattered communities, hostile crowds, and instead of withdrawing in self-protection, it pours itself out again and again, knowing it may not be returned, knowing it may be misunderstood, but loving anyway, because the source of that love is not the receiver, it is the giver of all life, the one who is love himself. And when that spirit indwells a person, they no longer calculate love. They become it. They embody it. They radiate it in silence and in speech, in confrontation and in compassion, without demanding to be understood or thanked. Because the nature of this love is not to keep score, but to keep giving, not to justify itself, but to demonstrate itself, not to protect itself, but to break itself for the sake of the other. This supernatural love is the greatest evidence that a life has been truly transformed by the presence of God, because it defies the nature we are born with, the nature of self-preservation, of revenge, of tribalism, of conditional affection, and replaces it with the nature of Christ, who laid down his life not for friends, but for sinners, who wept over cities that rejected him, who touched lepers and restored traitors and dignified the forgotten. This kind of love cannot be faked because it demands too much of the ego. It cannot be sustained through willpower because it flows from surrender. It is the love that walks with the addict, embraces the outcast, listens to the wounded, and gently calls even the most defiant heart toward hope. It does not delight in being right if being right means losing the person. It is patient beyond reason. It is kind without calculation. It refuses to gossip, refuses to shame, refuses to give up even when everything in the world says it should. It sits quietly with those in grief. It walks slowly with those who are weak. It celebrates the victories of others without envy and absorbs their pain without complaint. This love does not flinch at the sight of scars, does not retreat from confrontation when needed, but speaks truth in such a way that it heals rather than wounds, restores rather than shames, and always points back to the source from which it came, because those who walk in supernatural love know they are merely vessels. They do not produce it, they release it, they carry it, like light in a dark place, like water in a thirsty land. And though it may go unrecognized, though it may go unappreciated, it never runs dry, because it is sustained not by human affection, but by divine communion with the heart of God himself, who gives freely, fully, and forever without asking anything in return. except that we do the same in a world that has forgotten how to love without limits. Divine intimacy with the Creator is not a distant belief or a ritual repeated out of habit. It is the most sacred, most real, most life-altering relationship a soul can ever experience. It is not reserved for the elite or the outwardly righteous, but is offered freely to the broken, the weary, the seeker who dares to quiet the noise of the world long enough to hear the whisper of eternity. This intimacy is not something that begins with performance. It begins with surrender. It is found in the secret place where the masks fall away, where titles mean nothing, where success and failure hold no power. And all that matters is that you are known fully, completely by the one who created you, formed you in the womb, and never stopped loving you for a single second. Divine intimacy is not always emotional. It is deeper than emotion, deeper than feelings. It is the knowing that He is near even when He is silent, the assurance that He sees you even when others forget you, the comfort that His presence does not come and go with your moods or your merit, but remains steadily, faithfully, unwaveringly, because His covenant is not based on your perfection, but on His relentless mercy and unchanging love. It is waking up and sensing that you are not alone. It is walking through the valley of the shadow of death and knowing there is a rod and a staff guiding you. It is hearing Him in the beauty of creation, feeling Him in the quiet tears of your soul, recognizing His fingerprints in the seemingly ordinary moments of life that, upon reflection, were nothing short of divine appointments, arranged by a Father who is endlessly involved in the details of your journey, even when you fail to notice, even when you wander, even when you stumble again and again and again, and still He draws you closer, not with condemnation but with kindness, not with fear but with an unexplainable tenderness that causes your defenses to fall and your heart to rise. Hungry not for blessings or breakthroughs alone, but for Him, for His presence, His voice, His nearness, His hand, His breath in your lungs, reminding you that you are made for this connection, this union, this sacred friendship that turns prayer from obligation into oxygen, worship from performance into passion, and obedience from duty into desire, because you no longer serve a distant deity, but walk with the living God who whispers your name and longs for your gaze more than your gifts. This kind of intimacy cannot be learned through theory or inherited through tradition. It must be pursued, cultivated, and cherished in the inner chambers of the heart, where noise dies and true communion begins. It often grows most in seasons of brokenness, when every human support falls away and all that remains is the question, is God enough? And in those moments, when the lights fade, when the applause ends, when the plans fall apart, and the only voice that speaks is His, something unshakable is born. You begin to speak to Him not as a distant ruler, but as your closest companion. You begin to weep in His presence, not from guilt, but from gratitude. You begin to realize that He has been speaking all along, not just in thunder, but in the stillness, not just in miracles, but in the mundane, not just in scripture, but in your spirit that leaps when you hear His truth echo back to your soul with a force that transforms everything. Divine intimacy changes how you live, how you think, how you dream, how you relate to others, because once you have tasted the sweetness of His voice, the approval of men becomes irrelevant. The seduction of sin loses its grip. The pursuit of pleasure takes a backseat to the pursuit of His heart. You no longer pray just to get something. You pray to be with someone. You no longer fear the future because you've walked with the one who holds it. You no longer obsess over control because you've learned to trust the hand that guides. This intimacy does not make life easier. It makes it holy. It does not promise escape from storms, It promises companionship in them. It does not guarantee constant clarity, but it offers a peace that passes understanding, because you know that even in the silence, He is speaking. Even in the waiting, He is working. Even in the suffering, He is sanctifying. And your soul finds rest, not in the removal of trouble, but in the nearness of the one who walks with you through it all, who lifts your head, holds your hand, whispers your worth, and never lets go no matter how far you fall or how long you wander, because this intimacy is not earned. It is given, it is pursued, and it is the ultimate treasure that makes everything else seem like dust compared to the joy of simply being with Him.